All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started today. So thank you everyone for joining us for our AGU AGI Heads and Chairs webinar today. My name is Leila Gonzalez. I'll be sitting in for Christopher Keene today. Also joining us is Pranoti Asher, who's the Assistant Director of Grants and Education Programs at AGU, and Eva Kostu, who's the Program Manager for the AGU Bridge Program.
Thank you, Leila. Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited for us to be having this webinar on this May afternoon. We are excited to have our two speakers and panelists here today. Ann Egger is a very familiar name to the geoscience community. She, as you know, she's the Executive Director of the National Association for Geoscience Teachers, and she herself is a professor of geological sciences as well as science and math education at Central Washington University. Joining Ann is Kerry Brenner, who is the Senior Program Officer on the Board of Science Education at the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And they are here to tell us about this brand new report that was recently published. So take it away, Ann and Kerry.
Great, thank you so much, Pranoti. It's wonderful to be here and to be able to share this report with this interested audience. I'm gonna figure out the controls here on the slides, okay. All right, so our report is Transforming Undergraduate STEM Education, Supporting Equitable and Effective Teaching. And Ann was one of the committee members that wrote this report. It's a consensus report of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. So I'll tell you a little bit about the academies and then a little bit about the Board on Science Education where I work that was overseeing the report, and then we'll get into the details of the charge to the committee and the contents of the report. So the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine is actually a group of organizations. There are 3 honorific societies, one for sciences, one for engineering, and one for medicine. And those members are elected by their peers. But there's also an operational arm, a programmatic arm that conducts studies. And we operate kind of like a university in that we have different boards, like different departments in different disciplines or topic focus areas. So the National Academies is non-governmental, although we have historically received about 60% of our funding from the federal government. So the idea is to provide evidence-based guidance to the nation based on policy, practice, and research. So the research, policy, and practice is a very intentional combination. And so we bring together people into committees with different areas of expertise to tackle challenging problems. So if it's something that's straightforward to do or that one department at one university could do, then nobody asks us to do that. They ask us to figure out the big picture, challenging things, to bring together people with a lot of different areas of expertise who can like question each other and share their expertise and build on it. They can elevate the good work that's being done around the country and identify kind of the key issues where further research is needed, the key issues where having a common language will help advance efforts, and to kind of provide guidance for action by specific actors. So we'll go through later the recommendations in the report that say who we say should do what. So this study was funded by 3 different sponsors, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, the National Science Foundation, and the Gates Foundation. So we very much appreciate the money that they provided for us to do this work. We also would like to thank the people who wrote papers to inform the committee, the people who gave presentations to the committee, the people who commented on our discussion draft back in November 2023, that we used all of that input to improve and inform the final report. So here's the specifics of what we were asked to do. We were asked to develop a framework that provides approaches for and guidelines for evidence-based inclusive teaching. And so that is based on the research literature and the experience of practice from people who have done a lot of teaching. And so that's what was released in the discussion draft back in 2023. It's insanely different from what other people have shared before. What we know about how people learn has not changed a lot. We keep improving it a little bit, but it's good if the material is relevant to the person who's trying to learn it. Yeah, it's good if they feel a sense of belonging. There's some basic things that, but what's different about this report is we took that and built upon it to think about what were the policies and practices for departments, for programs, for schools, for colleges, for universities that incentivize or disincentivize people, instructors of all types, from using what is known about how people learn. And so we thought a lot about how it all comes together and what needs to happen in order for those principles of pedagogy to be used. So Anne's going to go through the specifics of what's in the report, but I want to just lay out a tiny bit more about the scope of it. This is all disciplines of STEM, all types of colleges and universities, all types of instructors. So that includes the graduate teaching assistants, the adjuncts, the visiting professors, the lecturers, the tenure track people, the people with tenure, all of the above. And it includes the students who are planning to be majors in a STEM field, but also all of those who are taking STEM courses as part of their requirements for general education or requirements for some other major. And so we thought really carefully about how to include all of the students, all of the instructors, and to be useful for people in all different contexts, in different disciplines of STEM and different types of colleges and universities. Okay, so, and you can get into the details.
Okay. So thank you for, again, I'm really happy to have the opportunity to talk to this group and see lots of familiar names in the list of participants and be able to share this work with this audience because, you know, as Kerry mentioned, the scope we took is quite large. The charge to the committee was substantial, but you know, we really had the approach was, we knew that it would take a systemic approach to make these changes, and it's not just focusing on individual instructors. So being able to talk to heads and chairs is a particularly important audience for us. So this is the table of contents of the whole report. I'm going to, let's see, there we go. Talk about first, we're not going to go through every single chapter, but I do want to talk about this core of chapters, including this last one, chapter 6, that's about the role of academic units, and then some recommendations for current action. So we won't cover all of the chapters, but you can find the whole report online. So chapter 2 really sets the context. What is the landscape of post-secondary STEM education today? So within this chapter, the materials or the literature that's covered includes who are STEM students, and many of the reports and the evidence that we were able to find often didn't differentiate STEM from undergraduate students more broadly. So sometimes we are just looking at who the undergraduate population is today and the diversity and demographics within that group, and calling out STEM where we can. What institutions do they attend, and how has that changed over time? Who's the instructional workforce? So Kerry mentioned the vital instructors visiting in, oh, I always forget the I, and visiting instructors, teaching assistants, and lecturers and adjuncts and lecturers. So this, you know, not just the tenure track faculty, but who is teaching in undergraduate STEM education? How are these institutions funded? And then really the historic and systemic inequities that have led to the landscape that we are in today. So there are the conclusions from this chapter, and I should have said this up front, each chapter has some conclusions that then lead to recommendations. So the conclusions from chapter 2 are that there are many longstanding policies and practices in undergraduate STEM that have produced, perpetuated, and exacerbated differences in opportunities, experiences, and outcomes. The changing demographics, college costs, and the STEM workforce demands underscore the need to improve the learning experiences of undergraduate students in STEM courses. So this is really one part of setting the scene of why we need this report and why we need to consider transforming undergraduate STEM education. Chapter 3 lays the research foundation for the principles or for the framework. And this is really talking about the extent of what we know about learning, and then thinking about in the context of some specific considerations in the STEM disciplines. So the first part is about how we know a lot about learning and the science of learning and the effectiveness of active learning and the use of mastery goals and mindset and how those influence the learning process. Then we focus on some of the considerations within the STEM disciplines and some of the really critical, what we know as evidence for what supports students' persistence or not in the STEM disciplines. So those foundational courses, introductory courses across the disciplines play an important role. Something called toxic course combinations that can be courses where students, if they take them at the same time, have a higher failure rate overall than if they were not doing so. So chemistry and calculus are an example of how that can lead to a lack of persistence. Challenges with the mathematics course sequences, and something very close to home in the geosciences is teaching and learning in the field, and how there are some specific issues with all of these considerations. This is the chapter where we lay out a lot of the evidence of inequities. So we see evidence of inequity in grade penalties, in the differences in persistence to degree, differences in belonging, power, and privilege, and all of that is really, there's substantial evidence for those. But there also, as Kerry mentioned, we're not the first ones to do this, so we wanted to make sure to highlight some of the existing efforts that promote equity and that are doing so and have laid out strategies and principles before. So this chapter ends with those. So some of the big conclusions from this chapter: learning in STEM involves complex processes that are shaped by identities, experiences, backgrounds, social interactions, and cultural context. So this is the one-sentence summary of everything we know about the research on learning. The widespread use of teaching strategies that are not supported by research have contributed to disparities for undergraduate STEM students. And instructional practices that take students' interests and backgrounds and experiences into account are more effective. And students' experiences in these foundational courses are particularly important for their persistence in STEM. So we're going to do a little bit of interactivity here within the presentation and use something called a waterfall question. So this makes use of the chat. So get yourself prepared. Here are the directions for this. If you haven't done this kind of thing before, I will put a question up on the slide here in a moment and give you a minute to think and type your answer in the chat, but don't hit return until I tell you to. So once we've had that minute or so, everyone will hit return at once and we'll see a waterfall of responses. So before I go to the question, I'm going to go back and just remind you of this slide. We're just thinking about disparities and disparities in opportunity and outcomes for undergraduate STEM students, and some of the things that are laying the groundwork for this report. Okay, so what disparities in outcomes have you seen in your undergraduate students in the geosciences? So take a minute, think about that. What are issues that are of concern in your own department or program or university? Let's see some responses. Oh, look at that. Okay. Math preparedness, participation in field work, career options, financial barriers, K-12 preparation. So, okay, more pre-college preparation, especially math and physics, socioeconomic stressors, differences in engagement with the course materials, not being available to do an undergraduate research experience or availability to go on field trips, lack of quality teaching, lack of exposure. So a lot of the pre-college preparation we see as a challenge, or there are disparities from that. ESL students struggle in intro classes, working full-time, students have to pay for college with fewer opportunities. Yes, so again, the not being available for some of the extracurriculars or the field trips or things on the weekends, working a job, hearing others call students lazy, but not having that same experience. Fewer non-male students complete the program. Okay, so gender disparities, working students, neurodivergent, not prepared in quantitative fields. So you have experienced, you see in your own students some of the same things we call out in the report. And we know in that who are STEM students today, we know that many students are working, many students are parents, many students are transferring through multiple institutions. So all of these things can compound some of the disparities that you've seen as well. Thank you for your thoughts. Oh, and I missed a few at the end. Instructional mode, disparities according to the instructional mode, absolutely face-to-face versus hybrid or online. And another issue with field campus being away from earning time. So let's get to the principles. This was the core. It's called, in the charge to the committee, it was called the framework. We really moved away from that language and instead are considering principles for equitable and effective teaching undergraduate STEM. Students need opportunities to actively engage in disciplinary learning. Students' diverse goals, interest goals, knowledge, and experiences can be leveraged to enhance learning. STEM learning involves affective and social dimensions. Identity and sense of belonging shape STEM teaching and learning. Multiple forms of data can provide evidence to inform improvement. Flexibility and responsiveness to situational and contextual factors support student learning. And intentionality and transparency create more equitable opportunities. So I'm just going to let you absorb those for a second. And if you have any questions about any of the words or meanings of those, we'll talk about them a little bit more, but I want to focus on these just initially. If people have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Okay, I'm not seeing things appear, but please feel free to throw a question in there if it comes up. I want to, so that this chapter lays out the evidence for each of these as a principle for equitable and effective teaching of undergraduate STEM education. Subsequent chapters, oh, one more thing, they're numbered here for ease of a list essentially, but we don't see them at all as hierarchical or that you do them in order. That's not the case. So instead we think of them all together as being part of a whole. They're all necessary for supporting equitable and effective STEM teaching and learning. You can't necessarily, pick and choose which ones which ones will better support it. They all work together to enhance STEM teaching and learning. So again, the evidence for these is laid out in chapter 4, and then subsequent chapters kind of put these into practice. So we think about these being implemented at different levels within the STEM undergraduate educational system. Oh, wrong direction. So the first level is within courses taught by instructors and things that individual instructors can do to implement these principles. Those courses and instructors are embedded within curricular programs, within academic units, which are typically departments or programs, but may be larger than that, or teams of instructors that control large courses or sets of courses. Those academic units and teams of instructors are embedded within institutions, and those institutions have external stakeholders and funders. And all parts of that system must be implementing or considering and thinking about the principles for equitable and effective teaching in order for that implementation to be successful. So as I said, the subsequent chapters cover each of those. We'll talk about chapter 5, a little bit about chapter 5 and how to implement courses and instructors, and a little bit about chapter 6, which is about academic units. And I'll let you read 7, 8, and 9 on your own to get a sense for more of that, the larger systemic change. So chapter 5 is really focused on instructional practices and describes, I would say, a subset of the possible instructional practices that effectively implement the principles. So I'm not going to go through each of those, but instead through a table that's in the report that's set up as what we envision is that there's teaching that has more of some things and less of other things. So more of a clear articulation of learning goals and how the work done in the course will help students achieve those learning goals, and less of a focus on getting through a set amount of content. More course structures that engage students as active learners, and less of course structures that maintain students as passive receivers of information. More activities that regularly engage students in using the skills and knowledge of the discipline, and less of the separate laboratory sections that focus on skills without the clear connection to content. More being transparent about opportunities and expectations for learning and engagement, and less assuming that all students are aware of what they should be doing or how things should work in the classroom. More grading practices that allow for formative feedback and focus on mastery goals, rather than grading practices that focus on a curve, theoretical distribution, and promote competition or a few high stakes assessment. So the chapter lays out some more details about different strategies. And again, this is really focused on the things a single instructor can do in a course to make changes. Chapter 6, we zoom out a little bit to that academic unit and realize that the academic unit that people in this webinar are leading or are helping to lead has a lot of, or plays a significant role in achieving these outcomes. So academic units might be a department, might be a program, might be a school, however your system works. They are defined by the fact that they oversee teaching, they oversee the curriculum. I'm going to come back to that in a second. They oversee or enact an academic and disciplinary culture. And they are really responsible for much of the way that teaching is valued and evaluated. The curriculum is this intended, enacted, experienced, and hidden curriculum. You might have heard some of those terms before. You can think of the intended curriculum as the ideal pathway that students take that faculty layout as a whole and what they imagine students or want students to achieve as they work their way through the curriculum. A geoscience program, you can imagine this as having both different content areas, different experiences in the field, and those are sequenced in a way that produces students who are highly skilled in the discipline by the end. The enacted curriculum is how that gets translated into courses and when those courses happen and how it gets kind of implemented within the infrastructure that is in place. That enacted curriculum is then experienced by students, and they come into it, as you know, and just hearing from your disparities that you listed already, they come in from different places. They transfer in with some math or not the right amount of math. They end up taking chemistry multiple times. They miss a quarter, and that's the only quarter something was offered. And so the way that students experience the curriculum is often quite different than what is certainly intended and what is enacted. And then on top of that, there are the things that we assume students know or assume they have access to or assume they can do that they might not know about or know that they should know. And that is often referred to as the hidden curriculum. Those things differ according to, the disciplinary culture. And again, you've already listed some of the things within the geosciences that are specific to our culture. We were, before the webinar, talking a little bit about how meetings are different for different disciplines, and geoscience meetings have a particular flavor to them, and so does the culture within the geosciences. Academic units also set up program learning outcomes for that curriculum, which may or may not be well implemented through the curriculum. And they're the place where foundational courses are taught and can be and must be coordinated across departments within the curriculum. So some of the conclusions from this chapter are that students are often expected to take multiple courses, but the connections between them are maybe not well coordinated, and the overall goals for what they learn across courses, across the whole curriculum, is often not well articulated. But academic units hold the collective responsibility for all the learning experiences they oversee and can work to improve the coherence of learning goals across course sequences, programs, and majors. And academic units also play a major role in decisions and policies about teaching, including how teaching is valued, recognized, evaluated, and rewarded. And we recognize that's also within the larger system, so that the next ring out, we're not going to talk as much about that today, but it is definitely part of the report and something you can look more into. So I want to take a moment to focus that chapter or call out some of the geoscience departments and programs as academic units and really think about these three things. So some of the issues to consider within our departments and programs, as I mentioned, we have a unique disciplinary culture, and how does this impact students? And already some of the things you've called out for neurodivergent students, and that there may be challenges with packing into a van and heading out into the field, for example, or not knowing exactly what to expect when we head out into the field and assuming that all students know what a field trip involves. For some of us, I would say geosciences tend to have a more casual, informal culture, and often on a first name basis in departments, and we really emphasize that. How is that different from what students experience in other places, and how does it impact them? Our foundational courses are often very different than other STEM disciplines. They serve multiple purposes. We're recruiting from those foundational courses, and we're also serving the gen ed requirements often. In both cases, this is a really key opportunity to engage students in disciplinary work and give them a sense of what it is like to go further in the discipline. As noted, as you have already noted, our geoscience students often face challenges in those allied science and math requirements in other departments, and coordinating across departments and trying to support our students in making progress in those can be really challenging. And this is something we call out in the report, as well as how working across departments and why that's important for implementing the principles. And the last thing I'll say here is that some of our program outcomes may not be as relevant as they could be. And what I mean by that, one of the things I've been involved with is leading our leading departments in revising their program learning outcomes. And I think there's a lot of emphasis on kind of covering the content of the discipline, and that has expanded as the geosciences has expanded. And they maybe haven't been as focused on skills or workforce or some of the things that might be more attractive and compelling and relevant goals for students to achieve by the end. So we're going to do another waterfall question based on that. So again, I'll put a question, 2 questions. You can choose one up and give you a minute or so to consider a response, and then I'll tell you when to hit return. So 2 questions. What data do you have access to for your department or program that could inform improvements? Or how have you already used data to inform changes that you're making in your curriculum, teaching evaluations, persistence to degrees? So again, thinking about those disparities you mentioned before, what data could you use to make changes there? Or what have you already done based on data to make changes? I'll give you a minute or so. These are longer, it's going to be harder to summarize. Yeah, so challenge for aligning course offering with needs of students who transfer to departments at university. So from the 2-year college side, knowing where students are going and trying to be aligned with all of the places that they might transfer to. People being incentivized to reduce DFWI, so D and F grades, withdraw and incomplete, I'm guessing is the I, in core classes, using outcome from grades, senior exit surveys, core course instructor surveys to identify gaps, nice. Persistence data, first destination surveys. Wow, that's a lot of great data. Oh, would like to. Oh, okay, sorry. So some things you have, persistence data, first destination surveys, that's great. Employer feedback, and would like to use exit interviews, written comments and feedback from course evaluations, and what's working, what's not is how you approach soliciting feedback. That's great. So even informally, away from formal evals. I think we all know a lot of the challenges with course evaluations, kind of the standard course evaluations, so that what's working, what's not is a really good approach. Access to data by request for age, ethnicity, race, and gender, that's great. Not true everywhere, so I'm glad you have access to that. An exit exam that assesses core concepts from all required courses. In the 2-year college, more targeted course learning outcomes. Feedback from universities on how well prepared our transfers are, and recommended multiple formative assessments covering a wide variety of learning styles. Wow, that's that's great. If you're already doing that, that's really great data. A big focus in the report is just this, that changes should be, this is one of the principles, that multiple forms of data can be used to inform improvement. So it's useful to know where you are in order to know where you want to go, where you want to be. And there's lots, you've called out lots of the data that you can use to inform those improvements. So good job. Keep at it. But I like that you're seeing both collecting data from students, from instructors, from the institution. There are lots of places to get those data that have different uses as you start to make changes in your program. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to turn it back to Kerry.
All right. So the next section is about the recommendations from the report. And there's 3 categories of recommendations. Before I talk about those and about a few specific recommendations, I want to give a little context for why we put these reports together and how we think people can use them. And one of the ways that they can be used is to take to your dean or your provost or whoever the right person is at your institution and say, look, the National Academies is saying we should do this. I therefore need access to this data that I don't have now in order to be able to follow their recommendations. And so there's a lot of other specific things in here, but we don't want you to be feeling like these recommendations are saying you personally have responsibility to do all of these things. We're saying this is kind of how we picture in the system what different people should do. It's all interconnected. And the people who hear about the report, please take it to the other people who have the ability to contribute to the effort, because it's a community that needs to be working together. So the way the recommendations are structured, the first set are about making those equitable and effective learning environments for the students. So what the instructors can do, what the curriculum developers can do, etc. The second part is about valuing and supporting those instructors. Instructors, remember, includes all the different vital faculty, tenure track, all of the kinds of instructors. And the third is measuring and advancing system change. So that includes both the aspects of data that we were talking about where you're measuring, but also all of the people making the big picture decisions that change and influence the system. So we're just going to go through a few of the recommendations. I don't think you want to hear all 15 of them. So the second recommendation, that's from that first section about improving instruction, says academic units collectively, that means all the people in the academic unit, the heads and chairs, but also all of the other members should collectively take responsibility for reviewing the whole portfolio of courses that they're offering, but also all of the courses that the students in their major or program are taking. Think about them collectively. You have more influence over the ones that are in your department, of course, but to think about the student experiences requires considering the ones outside. And so define clear course and program learning outcomes and use them to think about what's in those courses that you're offering, why you're requiring students to take courses in other departments, and what they're learning there and how it's connected to what they're learning in your department. And as part of this, use aggregated and disaggregated data to identify the actual experience. What order are the students taking the courses in? Which ones are they failing? You know, which ones are they are helping to bring more students into the major? So then in the second section of recommendations about supporting the instructors, we call upon graduate and postdoctoral program leaders to make teaching part of those programs, to make it an explicit part, to help those students and postdocs to learn about how to become good teachers, how to use the principles for equitable and effective teaching, but also more broadly, just to value instruction and to recognize that we're at institutions of higher education, and so education and learning should be key parts of what's happening. We also call upon institutions and programs to provide mentors to graduate students and postdocs, and ideally to faculty as well, to help them improve their teaching. And there's a whole section in the report about community and the ways that people can form disciplinary communities or communities. Just, it makes a big difference just to have someone else that you see in the hallway who you know also cares about teaching, and for there to be conversations at department meetings that focus on teaching and respect teaching and care about learning in those conversations. So the next recommendation is about the specific things we're calling upon you as academic unit leaders to do. So we had many conversations about the fact that you're not all powerful as a head or chair of a department, right? There are certain things that you can't just make happen, but there are certain things you can do. You can influence the agenda of the faculty meetings. you can consider who's being assigned to which courses. You might not have the authority to unilaterally change that, but you have the ability to get that into the conversation. And so we're recommending that there be time in meetings to discuss teaching related topics, that there be support for instructors, that the way that teaching assignments are made considers student learning, instructor learning, and the kind of the current state of things. What is the data already telling you? So here's recommendation 9 also has calls for academic unit leaders to basically think about the principles that are articulated in this report, those ones Anne showed us in the circle, as professional standards, to have expectations that all of the people teaching in your unit aspire to incorporate all of those principles into their teaching, and that there are evaluations of teaching that are not just the surveys that the students do at the end of the course, that there are more comprehensive and holistic ways of evaluating teaching. And so that can include observations by experts. It can include self-reflection on teaching. There's a lot of different ways that can be done. And it's not that the student voice isn't important, but the student voice doesn't necessarily tell you about whether the teaching is of high quality. Right, so I think this is the last recommendation that we're going to go into here. You can read them all in the report. We'll put up the QR code again on the last slide. So if you want to be able to find the full report, there's also a short version and an interactive website if you want to explore it a little bit more, but not read all of the 300 whatever pages. So this final recommendation calls on you as heads and chairs of academic units to consider the complexity of the undergraduate population at your institution and to recognize that they have varied goals, that they are taking varied pathways, and that it's your responsibility collectively as a unit to provide education to them that is equitable and effective and provides them opportunities to learn STEM, geoscience, etc. And so we call on you to look at and analyze the obstacles and the barriers, think about the transition points and the course offerings and where the students are experiencing challenges and where you can help improve. So we're going to go back to Anne for one more slide, and then we'll give you all a chance to ask questions.
Okay, thanks, Kerry. So not only do we recognize you can't do everything as a department head or chair, we recognize that many things you haven't necessarily been prepared for or don't know how to do them. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the support for acting on the recommendations, because you don't have to do this alone. I want to highlight NAGT's resources, the National Association of Geoscience Teachers. We have a traveling workshops program that has customizable workshop modules that focus on a lot of these very things. So developing and strengthening your program learning outcomes and figuring out how to distribute them appropriately throughout the curriculum, supporting all students and attending to department culture at both the undergraduate and the graduate level. Although this report is focused on the undergrads, we know that those of you that have both undergraduate and graduate, those programs are often deeply tied together and interact in important ways. Transforming those foundational and introductory courses are more things we can support you with. So there's a screenshot from the website there about these workshops, and I encourage you to take a look at that and consider those. Those are specifically designed for departments. We work with you to design a program that meets your needs and have a variety of facilitators that have a range of experiences that are more or less relevant to different kinds of departments. There are also both NAGT and many other organizations have workshops on mentoring, course design, things that can help individual faculty implement the principles as a mentor, as a teacher. I think between Pranoti and me, we send out a lot of those emails to the AGU community email list, so you're finding out about those. But recognize that many of those are built on these same principles, because we're pulling those principles from the research literature and what we know is already is at work. And then I want to highlight this group. You know, there's more that we can do within this community to talk, to make connections, to make sure we're working together as a group of heads and chairs within our discipline. And so the professional societies can really support that right now. NAGT, AGU, AGI, we're here to help support you implementing these principles. So we want to just move to, we have a little bit of time left for any questions, comments, concerns, and wanted to prompt any thoughts about these recommendations or supports this group can provide, or any other questions. So I see one from Cassie. Does NAGT have grants or similar programs, or similar, that programs with very limited budgets could apply for to offset the cost of a traveling workshop? Great question. I'll say, so one of the things we have done is work with people when they're writing a proposal to put the cost of that workshop in the proposal. So if you're looking, maybe it's something within your institution, maybe it's something small, that definitely give me a call, send me an email, and we can talk about that fee. Right now, we do have a grant that is offsetting the fee just for the transforming introductory courses. So those things kind of, as we have them available, we make that possible, but also we can work with you as you're writing the proposal. When professional development activities are designed and presented, they should follow best educational practices and model the techniques faculty are encouraged to use. No more hours-long sit and get lectures about active learning. Yeah, as we've just sat and lectured at you, we had a few interactive questions in there. But thanks, Mike, for saying that. I think, again, I'm obviously biased towards NAGT, but our professional development is designed, the on the cutting edge design philosophy uses that approach, that we're bringing people together not to be lectured at, but to engage actively in the same, using the same strategies that we're teaching people about. Layla, do you want to?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Pranoti.
I was just going to ask a question, to give people time to maybe type up some more questions. I know you alluded to, there are several folks here in the audience who potentially even have graduate programs. Is there an equivalent report, just like this one, that has been done for graduate education? I know there's lots of reports in the graduate education space at the National Academies, but I'm wondering if there's something like the FACES equivalent of this one.
There's not a National Academies report that is equivalent to this one, although I'd love to do one if you've got a funder for it. There are National Academies reports that address graduate education, but they're more about kind of thinking about the whole student, and then they're not so much about the pedagogy of the teaching. But there's a National Academies report on mentorship, which would be really relevant here, and that gets into a lot of very important issues. So that's what we've got so far here.
Thank you.
And there's some more for you.
Okay, I was actually just getting the link to that mentorship report, because it's a really great one, the science of mentoring in STEM. It's something we use in a lot of our workshops. Okay, what disciplines are covered by NAGT? So we take the same approach as NSF in defining geoscience. So Earth, atmosphere, ocean, am I missing one? So I will say it's the history of the organization is geology, but we've really grown and expanded over time. Oh, thanks, Wendy. We do, so the Earth Educators Rendezvous will be happening again next summer, 2027 in University of South Carolina. And maybe we'll have a workshop on this, this report, doing some of the implementation. 2026, thank you. 2026, not 2027. I got a total year ahead of myself. Craziness.
So any other questions from our audience?
So if you would like to do more with this report, please feel free to reach out to me. It's kbrenner@nas.edu, or go through Anne and she'll help coordinate it. But if like your institution wants to do something with this that would go beyond the geosciences, or and your regional area, I mean, whatever you think would be relevant, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to share this report to more people, more audiences.
Yeah, and I just, to be clear, so that you can download the report for free. It is awaiting final formatting, Kerry. Okay, so it's close, but you can download what's there now, and I put in some links, and from that you can get to the the 2-pager as well. And then there will be a print book that you have to pay for, but you can download the digital copy for free.
Thank you all for coming today and listening to us tell you about the report.
Yeah,
Yes.
Thank you. This was great. I think we have couple more slides. We want to just sort of finish out our webinar today. So again, for those of you who joined us a little late, a recording of this will become available, and you will be, because you registered for the webinar, you will get a copy of it, as well as sort of a PDF of the slides in case you didn't catch some notes. If you have any other questions that you can't think of right now, but they come up later on, feel free to reach out to me or Kerry or Anne and have your questions answered. And if you're a department chair or new department chair or didn't know about this community, please feel free to write to me as well, and I'll be happy to add you to the community. And we typically have an annual workshop at just prior to our AGU annual meeting. So we're still working on the details of that for this year, but please reach out if you're interested in that as well. And if we could go to the last slide, we do have a catalog of all our previous webinars, so please feel free to check them out at this website if you've missed them all. But note that we will take a break in the summer, but we will be back in the fall, and we will have several webinars that are sort of related to sort of skill building for your students in the area of workforce, and how do you kind of have those workforce skills that kind of show up in your curriculum. So sort of a continuation of this conversation we're having today. And also, as you know, both Kerry and Anne mentioned, TAs, so what kind of TA supports, how do we work with TAs? All those things will also be discussed in the fall. So keep your eyes open for notices about that to join future webinars. But thank you for coming today, and have a great rest of the day, and enjoy your weekend. Thank you very much.